Hello everyone. Today I'm going to explain why does our ego happen, how is it made, and tips on how to get out of it. So how is it made? First, it's important to maybe recognize that if you look at the entire animal kingdom, they don't have an ego. And this sort of points to what an ego actually is. So an ego is it's a personal identity that's constructed out of ideas. And these ideas can start with just one idea as you're 1 or 2 years old, as you're starting to learn language, and then it turns into 2 ideas, 3 ideas, and then it turns into many ideas. And then also these ideas correlate with stories of the past, and ultimately it's our ego's interpretations of these past stories, which then correlate back to itself to make a picture of its identity of this is who I am based on my past, and this is who I am based on my future, but there's only right now. So how is our ego happen? It happens because pretty much from birth we're absolutely bombarded with language that encourages egotism. This egotism is me and you, and this me identity forms an idea in our head. But ultimately, there's only just one single consciousness, which is what we are, which is the same as the entire animal kingdom. And it's this one single consciousness which assumes this idea in our head as our identity, and that is ego. But pretty much, yeah, as soon as you're born, pretty much within the first couple of years, you're learning language, and then you're absolutely bombarded by everyone around you, telling you who you are, and then pumping these ideas into your head. And then eventually your ego gets starting to get informed with these bundle of ideas which you're looking at, and you are this looking at that. And then eventually the ego starts growing on its own and adding more and more ideas. But the basic foundation of our idea identity is pretty much encapsulated up to about 7 years old, and then it's that basis of foundations of idea identity which runs our rest of our life. Now the reason why we're stuck in ego is because it speaks on our behalf, it gestures on our behalf, it comments on our behalf, it makes judgments on our behalf, it's speaking in us, so we assume if there's something speaking in me, this must be me. And then this is the assumption. So the way to undo it is to bring awareness to what ego is. Do a little bit of training to understand what ego is. Basically, it's just everything that talks in us is the ego. And I know this because I was in Leiden for 1.5 days several years ago. It happened. So I got a lot of good contrast to experiencing what enlightenment feels like, which is the absence of ego, and what which is my state right now, which is still living as an ego. But the good thing is with mindfulness is that I'm not as identified with it anymore. So it doesn't last too long because I'm very familiar with ego, what it is and what it is in me. I don't assume it fully now as my identity. But it still keeps perpetuating because there's still probably a lot of part of me that still hasn't got the cognition enough yet to live permanently in the enlightenment state. So my enlightenment happened for 1.5 days as I woke up 6 a.m. in the morning, and then I saw my ego it was a non-visual dream, and then in 1 second, like 1,000,000 kilograms disappeared, and that's what enlightenment feels like. It feels like 1,000,000 kilograms disappeared. And you sort of feel like you've returned back to normal. But you feel like that you were living in like an electrified fish pond your whole life, and then all of a sudden the electricity's removed, and everything's back to relaxed. So it's like you're being shocked 1,000,000 kilograms, and then all of a sudden all the electricity's switched off, and you're back to this warm bath of water, which is normal. So that's what enlightenment feels like, and you don't have this personal identity anymore, which is just an idea in our head. Every story that I think of Peter is just that, a story. And it's the Peter identity which made all its stories of it and its interpretations of the past and starts correlating an image for itself. And then me as consciousness identify with that image. And that's what keeps perpetuating me believing that I am this image. So the way to end it is just to see it is just an image in my head. It seems very, 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 very real. Because it's just in us. It's speaking as us. And it's so ingrained in us. It's like, how do you not see this as not being us? It almost seems impossible. But it's not, because you could just start with little things. Just recognizing, first of all, the commentary that our ego makes every day, like Groundhog Day. Every day it's making judgments. So if you look at those judgments, it's pretty easy for, to eventually get a bit of cognition towards that. You can see, all right, it's happening on its own, these Groundhog Day judgments. Every day it's making whatever, like 30, 40 judgments a day about usually particular things. So each of our egos got different things it likes to resist and complain about. For some it might be money, for some it might be relationships, and making a story about these money situations or these relationship situations. But ultimately it's just a story. Money is just neutral. It's just a piece of, in Australia, the money's plastic. It's just plastic. So it's the money could do anything. It's just a piece of plastic. And it's same with relationship. Whatever past experiences, maybe it's rare, but sometimes the past experiences come from our own ego. It doesn't actually come from the relationship itself. The person wasn't actually doing what their ego claimed it to be doing, and it makes a story. But sometimes there is actions that certain people do in relationship, and that can give validation as well. But ultimately, the ego is based on unhappiness. That's what it lives off. It's unhappy. It's in a constant state of resistance and unhappiness, and it's going ever more in that direction. So this is one of the most powerful things I can tell you about enlightenment. What happened to me when it was 25 years ago or something, when I started doing mindfulness, I reached a point where I said to myself, I realized I probably didn't realize right at the start the 6 things in life, what my ego complains about, which is what someone said, what they didn't say, what happened, what didn't happen, and what they did and what they didn't do. These are the 6 things that our egos complain about. But when I first started mindfulness 25 years ago, I reached a point where I said, I don't give an absolute damn about those outside things anymore. All that I'm concerned about is, what does my ego think about those 6 things in life? What's it saying about that? And can I see that it's actually being reacted to its own commentary? And can I bring a distinguishment and discernment between me and this commenter in me? And I don't care about the outside world anymore. I don't care, absolutely. And that's what caused very rapid enlightenment on a daily basis with me. It was happening on a daily basis. I was losing 100 kilos and 1,000 kilos every single day. It was happening, and it happened for many years, that process. And then after, I don't know, it was maybe like 20 years ago or something, 5 years ago, after 20 years or 15 years or something of doing mindfulness, that's when I had that dream, and the full enlightenment happened. And then the next day, at about 4 o'clock, the 1 million kilograms gradually returned, like 1,000 kilos every few minutes. And then eventually all my ego and all my image of who I think I am came back, and I identified with it again. So I'm still identifying with it now, because it's just it is quite difficult to break that identification. So the best we can do is, mindfulness is probably one of the best techniques out there, because it gets to the root of the problem. It's teaching you about how the idea gets born when you're a kid. And also, I've mentioned it many times, if you look at the contrast, the way the ancient American natives brought up their kids, they didn't bring language at all until the kid was 18 years old, because they didn't want to build their egos up. So, but in our society, we just absolutely smash the children as soon as they're born. Like, there's some people actually playing language learning lessons to their womb as the child's in still in the body, you know, hasn't been birthed yet. So it's just like we're absolutely obsessed with building this ego identity, and we've got not many people have recognition about what even ego is still. There's still a greater majority of people that are living their life have absolutely no idea what ego is. So when I first heard about it 25 years ago, I went on a date with a woman that was an Eckhart Tolle fan. And on my first date, she's explaining mindfulness, and I was like, wow. Like, why didn't someone tell me this? My whole life I've been waiting to hear this. So that's where I was at in mindfulness. When I first heard about it, I thought, wow, that makes sense. Like, I already was doing a lot of things that was inclined to that. I was doing a lot of Anthony Robbins stuff for about 3 years. Which I didn't realize was a lot of mindfulness stuff in Anthony Robbins as well. A lot of the aspects Anthony Robbins is into, is the foundation of it is mindfulness. But I didn't know it as that. I didn't even know what the word mindfulness was. So mindfulness means just to be mindful of our ego's commentary. And then eventually this distinguishment and discernment happens where you see, I am this, and I'm looking at my ego here. And I am this, not that. And then as you bring this distinguishment, it's like a separation occurs, and then you start to see, hang on, I'm not this ego. And as you cognitize and see that you are not this ego, it starts to lessen and dissipate, and it weakens. And then some of the usual long-term patterns of complaining and suffering that your ego used to do to certain situations like money or whatever relationships, suddenly some of those things might start dissolving. So you encounter the same money situation, but this time there's no commentary anymore. So that's what happens when you do mindfulness, especially when you detect a very common and old structure, repetitive judgment structure within you by your ego. And you soon to... And one of the biggest keys also, which I try to explain a lot, is try not to take this ego seriously, because then it's like the ego coming in the background and taking itself seriously. So that's why it's important to accept, it's called acceptance commitment therapy, which is a form of psychology, which is very similar to Eckhart Tolle and mindfulness, which is mindfulness actually. But to accept your ego in a non-judgmental and a happy way, like you feel good in your stomach as you're accepting your ego, that will absolutely shatter your ego to a million pieces. Like in a very peaceful way. But if you're accepting your ego in a struggling way, which can happen, and it's okay if it does happen. I've done it for me for many years as well, and it still does it occasionally as well. My ego comes in through the background and resists itself as I'm trying to look at it and observe it. But the key point is to accept your ego in a way where you don't mind it, where you love it and accept it because you know it's not you. It's just it's a little thought record player that's playing in the background. It's not personal, and it doesn't have a life on its own, even though it seems like it does because it keeps repeating. But it's got a bit of momentum to it because we've spent so much time invested in it. And it's like... It's another good story is the pigeons in I think, I don't know, it was in some place in London or something, Leicester Square or something, and you know there's a lot of too much shit being done by the pigeons, so the council put a sign up, please don't feed the pigeons anymore because we're getting too much pollution and that. So eventually everyone stopped feeding the pigeons, and they didn't come anymore. So that's kind of like our ego. If you keep feeding it, then it keeps coming back. It's like a guy named Mooji. I like watching Mooji YouTube videos. His name's spelled Mooji. He's a very good mindfulness teacher. I don't really watch... sometimes I watch some Eckhart Tolle, but not that much anymore. Mainly just Mooji occasionally here and there. But yeah, he says it's like every time your ego comes, you give it 5-star accommodation, you know, and... you know, but he says a lot of really good words. You know, it's like, what else did he say? It says something like, I don't know, I can't remember now. But yeah, check out Mooji, his name is. All his videos is free. He's got thousands of videos on YouTube. But his words are very clear. And if you can not mind, he looks a bit religious, like he's like a Rastafarian, and he's in the Indian setting, and But if you can put that aside, like some people don't like seeing religious sort of figures speaking or whatever, but if you put all that aside, you know, that's an important thing, because he's got some good words to speak. Also with me, Eckhart Tolle used to mention a lot of religious stuff, and at the time I wasn't that comfortable listening to that. So, but I just sort of focus on, look, I'm interested in his words about mindfulness, so I focus on that. But now I don't mind listening to religious things. Just yesterday I like watching a video on Joel Osteen and that sort of thing. So I don't mind listening to religious stuff now. So, because yeah, it's sort of all the same sort of thing. Joel Osteen, to me, it seems like a lot of mindfulness in the, you know, bringing awareness, and, you know, bringing a different outlook and vision to your life, and helping break that identity. I've seen lots of videos where he talks about that, how to break that identity. But that's what it is. We keep identifying every day. It's just as soon as we wake up, it pops up online, and we assume that this character speaking within us is us. And that's what keeps perpetuating it. So, and definitely don't try to fight the ego, because that's the ego doing it to itself. And don't even try to make enlightenment a goal, because that's again the ego doing that. So the ego always tries to get you to identify. It doesn't care how it gets you to identify with it. And that's why a lot of people who do mindfulness, they can take on a spiritual ego where they're more superior and better than others by doing mindfulness, and then that's another trap, you know. So that's how tricky our ego is. It always, as long as you're identifying with something, a thing, then that's the ego, because who we are is no thing. Consciousness is not a thing, it's the awareness of things. It is the one that allows things to exist, because it is the cinema screen in which things can be projected onto it. But you are the cinema screen, not whatever comes projected. So what can be projected is unlimited and infinite. But you are not that comes and goes. You are the ever constant. So that's another good analogy as well. The only thing that's ever constant in our lives is us as the consciousness witness to the things that come and go, to the thoughts and ideas in our head. Every thought and idea, every word spoken is not us. So when I was in the enlightened state 5 years ago, there was no more emotions anymore. And the reason for that is because my Peter identity disappeared, and because it couldn't make judgments and that to situations, even positive judgments and make positive emotions, or negative judgments and make negative emotions, and it's experiencing both. Because that wasn't around anymore, there was no more emotions. And you realize when enlightenment happens, you don't need emotions anymore. They were only a temporary substitute, a necessary substitute to the love that you are, which is a state of being. It's not an emotion. So a lot of people misinterpret love as an emotion because they haven't experienced enlightenment yet. But when you experience enlightenment, you will know that love is definitely not an emotion, because an emotion is the ego projecting thoughts out into the world, and its thoughts and its labels get bounced back and come back as an emotion based on the thoughts, not based on reality. And that's where all emotions come from. So that's another thing to cognitize as well, is to notice these emotions, how they're made, that don't actually come from reality. And that was another thing when I first started mindfulness that helped massively speed the process of enlightenment, is that I saw that it wasn't the world anymore causing my suffering. And one, I wasn't the sufferer, I was my ego. But it was my ego's projections and judgments and labels to the world, which was bouncing back as emotions, and the world was neutral in many aspects. Yes, certain things happened still. People did things, they didn't do things, they said things and didn't say things. Things happened and didn't happen. But I tried not to focus on all those 6 things anymore. And I saw what's more important is what's my ego's interpretation to the 6 things. How is it feeling based on its interpretation? And then I could suddenly see, here's the world, and here's my ego's interpretations of the world. And then I could start to see the world in a different way. It wasn't through the filter of my ego anymore. So that's what our ego does. It creates filters, and we keep seeing the world through that filter, which was created at 7 years old. Most of these filters are created. So we didn't even have a chance yet to form our own viewpoint of reality. We're a lot of our viewpoints, we're absolutely convinced that is reality, 1000%, and it's not. It's a viewpoint that was constructed where you didn't even have the maturity yet to look at it with calm and peaceful eyes. And that's why the things that used to make us cry now make us laugh. That's because what's happened is our consciousness has reinterpreted our old ego situations, and it's dissolved them. So those you can call them immature interpretations of the world when we're young. As we get older, we reevaluate those situations and we develop a new perspective. So the old perspectives of our ego disappear. So a lot of the simple, primitive, childish ones disappear very quickly, but the foundation of them are still there. The basis foundation of all those interpretations are still there, and and as we get older, generally speaking, we get more peaceful, and that's because we're doing mindfulness naturally anyway. We're dissolving our old egoic patterns and filters. And the more you keep dissolving these filters, the more closer you're getting to enlightenment, because enlightenment is the absence of ego, the absence of filters. You're seeing the world as it is, and you're being yourself as you are, without any emotional identity which is false and illusionary, being mispresented as who you are anymore. So that's why and it's untouchable, your consciousness. You never suffer anymore. That's what enlightenment's like. You cannot suffer. You can't even imagine what it's like to suffer because you don't have an ego anymore. You can't even imagine what it's like to be an ego anymore when you're enlightened. So just like us in our in ego state, we can't imagine what enlightenment's like. How can you not suffer? That's impossible. It doesn't make sense. But when you're enlightened, you'll see that the opposite is true, that you can't even imagine what it's like to be an ego anymore. How can you believe to be this idea, I'm me? You know, not that anyone would be saying that, but I'm just sort of giving words. If that's what consciousness could say, that's what it would say. But our consciousness doesn't claim enlightenment either. That's what happened when it happened to me. There was not like, wow, I'm enlightened, because there was no I anymore. That I was just an idea. So it was just enlightenment. It was no big deal. Even when I went outside in the night time during that enlightenment, the night air was glowing orange, and there was no me saying, wow, look at all this night air glowing orange. So but the first thing, that was the first time my ego spoke in that 1.5 days. It said, you need to go and see a doctor. You're having a stroke. And then as soon as it spoke, it made its own emotion in 1 second. And because I was in the enlightenment state, my awareness just saw all this, and it just washed away. And then the ego didn't speak again. And then it did speak a little bit as I was going to sleep that night. It said, oh, you don't think you're going to be enlightened tomorrow? And then I went to sleep. And then as I woke up, it said, oh, you're still enlightened. So it probably spoke, I don't know, maybe 3 times in that enlightenment state. And the contrast was tremendous, because there was no more talker anymore. The ego was gone. So because it only spoke 3 times, it was like self-evident. So there's nothing that speaks within us is us. Then what do we do is the question. We're sort of like a knower. It knows. So it's kind of like the animal kingdom. The animal kingdom doesn't have a voice saying we should fly in this direction, the bird. Or this bird's eating all my food, he shouldn't be doing that. The birds just do they just act without a speaker in their head. It's based on knowing. And they're hooked up to proper full intelligence, the intelligence of the world, because they don't have an ego that's blocking the intelligence anymore. The ego dumbens us, absolutely dumbens us, because for me to see all this orange luminescent air, the whole air was luminescent outside. It probably later, I realized months later that that's probably how miracles happen, because you don't have a someone identity telling you how life should be and shouldn't be anymore. That doesn't happen anymore. So there's no more limitation anymore. So because you start to look at the contrast in people, all the different people with different egos. Everyone's got different limitations. That's because they're all got different egos. And some limitations of their egos are very obvious to see in other people. You see, that's crazy, because I've been living my whole life without that limitation that you're saying. So I know that that's not true. But so it's very easy to see the ego limitation speaking in another, especially when you don't even live that. But it's very, very, it's a million times harder to see it in yourself. So the good news is that as you start undoing your own ego, and it starts weakening and lessening because you're not feeding it with your attention anymore, it becomes 1,000 times easier to see other people's egos. And then it also becomes a lot more easier not to misinterpret their ego as their identity. Because as you misinterpret the ego in yourself, you also do it to others. And that's why you just keep living in this hell realm. It's all self-projected outside. You're going back and forwards into a loop because you haven't undone your own ego first. So this is why it's critical. It's so important. Don't worry about the outside world. Focus on your own ego. Focus all your attention on it. Learn about your ego. Learn to get better at accepting your ego. Learn to get better at not minding your ego. Learn to smile at your ego. Learn to see the impersonalness of your ego. And then as this all dissolves, enlightenment things will happen. You might experience big euphorias each day. For me, with the first day I started in mindfulness, in the first 3 days I had 3 mini enlightenments. One on one day, one on the other day, and one on the next day. And that was because I was looking at an old groundhog structure, which I'd never seen before. It was repeating itself for decades within me, and it was the first time I sat back and looked at it within myself and thought, and then as I looked at it, bang, it dissolved and all this euphoria happened. So, and then for several years I had euphoria, you know, every several days, and then I had the big enlightenment about 5 years ago. These days, I don't know, I'm pretty much like living in, I don't know, maybe 97% peace. And then my ego still flares up every day. It still makes comments every day. It's still, some days it gets into negative complaints, you know, about people and situations. And then I see if I can bring a bit more mindfulness to it, and see if I can, you know, undo it again. So until full enlightenment happens, I think you still got to keep working on mindfulness like I do. It's not something that goes away quickly. And I think even Eckhart Tolle says, even after some big full enlightenment, yeah, some basic vigilance is needed still. His enlightenment lasted for 5.5 months, but he says he can go even 1 trillion times more than enlightenment. I don't know how he does it, through maybe if he does meditation or something. But yeah, so I haven't had that big deep state of enlightenment for 5 years now. But I still do have occasional daily, you know, just releases from ego. I still work on my ego. I still look at it, but it's greatly lessened. It's like 97% less complaining now, and it's like 97% more easier to see than it was 20 years ago or 25 years ago. So that's the key, folks. Thank you. Have a good day. Thanks for watching. And so yeah, don't identify. See ya.